Now, here's the top 25. Not a lot of movement. Ohio State is 3. There's Florida State, Ohio State with the big win. There's Texas and Oklahoma right there next to each other. Alabama sneaks into the top 10. Penn State falls a little bit. Nobody fell more than North Carolina after Virginia's first top 10 road win in football program history this past weekend. And then you see Air Force is kind of cute right there. I love it in the top 20 because I love the way they play football, old school, that wishbone offense.
Yeah, and Virginia is not a new football program either. Like, that shows you how long, like, they've been around a while. So that's a huge one. And, North Carolina not only put themselves behind the 8 ball a little bit in the ACC race. I mean, I think even if they win out, they're out of the CFP because you're just looking for excuses of the committee to keep somebody out of the top 4, right? When you say, like, okay, who's your loss to? Oh, a team that won one other game.
Mm-hmm. No, that's a bad loss.
Yeah.
Great job by Virginia in winning their first road game against the top 10 opponent in history, the football history.
I don't know how much stock I was buying in North Carolina playoff hopes, but those are dashed now. I mean, they'd have to have a lot of carnage happen around them to get over the loss to Virginia. That was a major victory for the Cavs. Good for them. I know it's been rough going the last couple of years, and they haven't had a lot of bright spots to grab onto. So this was certainly one of those, and I'm sure there was a big-time celebration on the way back home from Chapel Hill. So good on them. And, it does make the ACC interesting, or the ACC race a bit more interesting. I will say, though, on the Air Force thing, this is not a knock on you, but the way that you said that, like, oh, look how cute they are, that's kind of a knock right on the blue blood teams of like, oh, look, they're in the top 25.
That's not what I meant, but I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, and so it's like, no, I mean, they're real deal Air Force, and they're not some cute little toy that if you try to pet them, they're going to bite you now. So good for them to take care of their business as well, and that was a stunning win for Virginia over North Carolina.
All right, go ahead.
What I would say about Air Force, when people go like, oh, yeah, it's Air Force, like, okay.
Go play them.
Do you want to play them? Like, your team would probably, like, if you're in the top 10, you'll probably beat Air Force. Probably. But do you want to play them? No, I don't. I don't want to play Air Force.
It's no different than when Navy was really good, and no different than Army and what they took Oklahoma, remember, to the brink just, 2, 3, 4, maybe it was longer than that ago, although LSU just crushed them in Baton Rouge over the weekend. I want to get to a couple of things. Go back to the poll if you wouldn't mind, Garrett. This is from Ralph Russo, who obviously puts up the poll on the works for the AP. There has not been a team other than Georgia and Alabama ranked number 1 since the middle of the COVID year. There has not been a team outside of the Deep South ranked number 1 since Ohio State. What year do you think it was? Ranked number 1.
2014 when they won it?
Greg? 2015. That's the last time somebody out of the Deep South was ranked number 1 in the AP Top 25 poll. That's hard to imagine. Alabama ran it. LSU had their run in 19. Georgia's had theirs now for the last, what I think are 20-plus weeks as far as the poll. That, to me, is hard to imagine.
Yeah, I mean, it is and then it isn't when you think about just how, the national championships have gone the last few years, and you think about Bama's run of dominance, and then Bama's run of dominance turns into Georgia's run of dominance. So there hasn't been a whole lot of opportunities to knock those teams from their perches and take over that number 1 spot, and the national championship games reflect that. And I guess Clemson, is that South Carolina Deep South? I guess, it is considered that. But I don't know. That's an interesting note. But I look at the end of that poll and I see James Madison on there, which is very, very interesting to see JMU there, given that they're not going to probably be able to play in a poll game here at the end of the year unless there's some exception because there's not enough teams or whatever. But good on them. And that should bolster their case for the transition that they've made. That's incredible for that school to find themselves in the top 25. Tulane, Duke, Air Force, JMU. Not a lot of parity there at the top, but certainly at the bottom, a lot of interesting schools that we don't see all that often, especially combined like that. So pretty cool to see that.
All right, here's another note in the top 25. Georgia, if they remain ranked number 1 in the next 3 weeks, they will have tied what is Miami's streak from 2001 to 2002. That would be 21 consecutive weeks. Southern Cal, USC, has the record 33 consecutive weeks at number 1, 03, 04, 05, until they ran into a guy and a team from Texas and Vince Young. All right, now, bangers. Top 25. There's only 2 games this week in the top 25 where both teams are ranked. Now, there's some really interesting games, but these are the 2. Both at 2:30 this Saturday. Oregon and Utah. My goodness, what a collision course this one is. Utah with a great win against USC, and we'll get into that. And then Duke 20 to Florida State, pretty deep. Louisville at 18. That game is on ESPN. 2 top 25, 2 teams, both ranked in the top 25 this week.
Yeah, I think it's kind of unfortunate for Duke because I don't think Riley Leonard will play in this game unless he played pretty solid for 3 quarters, but once he took that gigantic hit and got mauled, then he was out of the game. And I remember thinking at the beginning of the week, like, why Florida State was getting 14.5 points over a really good Duke team. Well, Vegas thought that Riley Leonard wasn't going to play. And when Riley Leonard was in the game, it certainly wasn't a 14.5 point spread. And the minute he went out, it definitely was because Florida State won by 18. So he's that much of a difference maker for Duke. And I came away like, I am a Riley Leonard stan now. That dude is tough as nails. He was trying to get Mike Elko to put him back in the game after, he was clearly in a lot of pain. Mike Elko did the smart thing and said, look, we've got to think about the rest of the season because this is just one conference loss if it did wind up that way, which it did. But I'm a huge Riley Leonard fan now, and I hope he gets to play down the stretch, but I would not think he would play this week after that.
Yeah, I have no idea what his injury status is or what the updates are. Haven't looked since Saturday night, but he played his tail off. That was a valiant effort from Duke. I know they don't want a ribbon for participation or anything like that, but they deserve more than a pat on the back because they did give the Noles a stressful night and had some moments there where you wondered if they weren't going to be able to pull off the upset, which would have been just incredible to be talking about today. But, FSU got the job done. It's unfortunate that Leonard's banged up, but, man, he showed the heart of a champion, if you will. As cliche as that can kind of be sometimes, he definitely showed that on Saturday night. So, not the sexiest lineup of games as far as rankings go with just the 2 that you showed there. But both of those ought to be, very interesting and obviously have some implications for their leagues and their own teams. So that'll be fun to see those 2. And as we know, the last time there was a weekend that wasn't really chock full of a lot of ranked games, it turned out to be one of the wildest weekends ever. So we experienced that earlier this year, and maybe that's what we're in store for this weekend. I hope so.
All right, now, Paul,